Generational hype. There are only a small group of players that can ever be debated that had generational hype coming into the NBA. But it's become so mainstream to hype someone up to superstardom before they even touch an NBA court. And of course, our main example of that will be LeBron James being called the chosen one in high school and exalted as the next big NBA player coming out of high school. But the thing about that is LeBron James was actually able to validate that hype, as we all know, 21 seasons later as the all-time leading scorer in the NBA, a four-time NBA champion, a four-time NBA MVP. But even with that being regarded as one of the best players of all time, if not the best player, the basketball world has been waiting to see who would just be considered the next big player after he leaves. And after all these years, we might actually be able to see that in Victor Wembanyama, the 7'4", 8-foot wingspan prospect from France, and probably one of the most unique players we have ever seen. But as his career just gets started, who are the people in between who are also considered the next big prospect? And what became of them with all the hype given to them? That is the subject of today's video, as we see what gave these group of players this hype, how they used it to their advantage, and finally, how their NBA careers turned out at the end of the day. With that being said, if you want to see more videos like these, be sure to like the video, and we are now officially on the road to 100K, and be sure to subscribe to be a part of that and to catch more videos. But as usual, this will be a long one, but you already know who it is. Roll it!
3, 2, 1.
Weights in the weight room, so he stitched up in the left.
But before we start, let me take the time to thank today's video sponsor, Morgan & Morgan, the largest injury law firm in America. With over 3 million yearly calls and over 15 billion recovered in settlements, Morgan & Morgan is a trusted and effective source to help any injury case you have. And their process to submit a claim is super simple and can be done in only 8 clicks or less. No need to go to a brick-and-mortar law firm. Everything can be done from your digital device with the power of your fingertips. And the best part of using Morgan & Morgan is the fact that you have nothing to lose using them as your injury firm, as there is no cost to you unless you win the case. A completely stress-free experience from the contacting process all the way to the courtroom, where you can trust them to handle everything with their 900 lawyers nationwide and over 4,000 support staff members to help you every step of the way. If you're ever injured in an accident, be sure to submit a claim using my link in the pinned comments or description below. Again, thank you to Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring today's video, and let's get back into it. The prospect that will start off this video takes place 4 years after LeBron James' initial start of his NBA career. Every year, the NBA is always looking for the next great big man to join the likes of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Hakeem Olajuwon, Wilt Chamberlain, Shaquille O'Neal, etc., etc. But in the 2007 draft, that person who was given that generational label for centers was the big man from Ohio State, Greg Oden. Now, as we all know, Greg Oden nowadays, from his story, from the aspects of his shortcomings and his depression during and after his NBA career, has been terrible. But let's focus on his basketball upbringing that gave him the label as the next great big man and next generational NBA player. Greg Oden has had NBA superstar written all over him since he was in high school. And while this was before the likes of the current high school basketball scene that we know about online, that is more business oriented than basketball oriented at times, Greg Oden was one of the most dominant players in the 2006 high school class, leading his Lawrence High School in Indiana to 3 consecutive 4A high school state championships. While at Lawrence North in his senior year, he averaged 22 points and 10 rebounds a game while owning the National Basketball Player of the Year in both his junior, which is rarely done, and senior year. And as you can expect, was also the Gatorade Player of the Year in his own state. But while his stats probably don't pop out with you, the talks about him were on the level of another all-time great big man. Here is a quote from a longtime Indiana basketball reporter in Gary Donna. Greg Oden, George McGinnis, and Oscar Robertson are the most dominant players I have ever seen. There have been a lot of 6'10", 6'11 players, but there has never been one like Greg Oden. Due to his play at Lawrence, he would only make his name more well known, ending his high school career as a McDonald's All-American and leading his high school to being the #1 ranked team in the United States of America. But if his high school campaign wasn't enough, he'd go on to Ohio State to show that exact same dominance and prove that it wasn't a fluke by any means, as a freshman averaging a similar 15 points, 10 rebounds, and 3 blocks a game while garnering all types of awards for it. The Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, a consensus All-American, the Big Ten Tournament MVP, and even led the Buckeyes to the finals of the national tournament against the legendary Florida Dynasty at the time, losing 84-75. But he couldn't be blamed for it, scoring 25 points and blocking 4 shots in that effort. At this point, he achieved everything that he could do outside of being a national champion in the college level. But unlike the old days where players played for multiple years in college, Greg Oden proved that he did enough to warrant going to the NBA right away. Despite people thinking that he could never be a great NBA player coming right out of high school due to his stature, eye of the game, and agility for his size. The only concern was the slight wrist injury that he sustained, but the fact that he played his entire freshman year with a messed up wrist and still did what he did only makes him a more attractive player. But coming into the NBA draft combine, he only made his stock rise higher as the race for the #1 pick between him and Kevin Durant. Things were so hyped in the city of Portland, with the marketing campaign in the city itself was probably the biggest you'll ever see for a top pick in a draft at the time, even bigger than what San Antonio fans did from Wemby. But while I could explain how the competition went between Oden and KD, I think this radio clip from Colin Cowherd's radio show will do it much more justice.
The Oregonian, that's the primary newspaper in Portland, the Oregonian has secured the official weights, measurements, and testing results from the Orlando pre-draft camp. And wait until you get a load of the freak of nature called Greg Oden. For starters, his numbers blow Kevin Durant of Texas completely out of the water. Players were rated on how many times they could bench press 185 pounds. That is important. Even though it's not as important as the NFL, the reality is the NBA season is long, your durability and your core strength is really important. Only one player in the pre-draft camp was unable to bench even 185 pounds. Kevin Durant. Come on. That is embarrassing. I'm a talk show host and I bench over 185. That is brutal. Greg Oden is faster than Durant in the three-quarter court sprint. He is quicker than Durant in the lane agility drill and has better numbers in the running and standing vertical jumps. In the standing vertical jump, a 7-foot center got a better vertical than Kevin Durant. And Greg Oden has a mind-boggling 7.8 body fat percentage. I'm here to tell you I measure mine once a month. That is unbelievable. That guy is tight. For most big men, it's above 12%. Oden is 6'11" without shoes, 7 feet with him, 257 pounds, an incredible wingspan. Standing reach is 9 feet 4 inches, the highest of anybody in the draft. Oh, it's not even close. The big guy has a much better body and is faster and quicker and more agile than the wing guy. Okay, draft over. Portland's taking Greg Oden. It's over. There's no other argument. Any talk show host, any emailer, any caller that goes on and says Durant should be #1 isn't doing their homework or is just trying to incite calls and be controversial. Greg Oden is the #1 pick. It's all over.
And while that may have not been the nail in the coffin, it was certainly a funny conversation in the debate between those two. Now, as we all know, he was drafted first overall with superstar potential written all over for him, but as we all know, his career ended just as quickly as it started, getting a microfracture surgery on his knee that ended his rookie season again before he could even step on an NBA court. Getting a foot injury in his actual debut a year later that knocked him out a few games, and then kneecap surgery while colliding with Corey Maggette in a February matchup. And after a less than stellar rookie season, people had hope that he would bounce back. And that's exactly what he would do in his second actual season, where he looked to have a breakout season, showing strides defensively as a top shot blocker in the league and getting more looks as a scorer. But that was until he tore his patella in his left leg that prematurely ended his career and started a further whirlwind of setbacks that only allowed Greg to play 105 games in 7 years of service, missing 4 of them entirely. As we all know, his time off the court was a complete nightmare, but I will not be covering that. But the potential of Greg Oden was obviously there. But if there's one thing you can't deny sometimes, it is the human body and its shortcomings. But while he didn't reach his potential that many have labeled him with since high school, everyone can at least give him a pass due to his injury history and how we never got to see him at his full potential in the absolute slightest. It is very rare you get multiple Hall of Fame worthy players in a draft class together, but it's even more rare to have two players considered to be generational prospects in that same class. While Greg Oden was considered to be the #1 guy in high school, college, and in the NBA draft, the guy who was always in his shadow as the #2 was just as amazing, if not even more spectacular, in a totally different fashion. And that person that was the #2 recruit in the 2006 high school class was Kevin Durant. We talk about the very tall players who can dribble, shoot, and create his own shot like a guard, like we do at Wemby, Bol in high school, and many others. But one of the originals was Kevin Durant, growing to be the height of 6'7" and going to Mount Rose Academy in high school, averaging 23 points, 10 rebounds, and 3 steals, 2.5 blocks a game. He was considered to have the entire package of a basketball player, but then he also continued to grow more to where he'd be marked as 6'10" going into his freshman year at Texas. But just taking a look at his high school highlights, you could tell already with some time growing into his body with a very, very slight frame of 6'10" and 215 pounds going into college and a few years professional basketball, he'd become absolutely impossible to stop at the NBA level. However, once again, even though he was hyped to the moon and back as a potential all-time great, one thing that always kept him behind Greg Oden was the fact that we've truly never seen a player like KD before, while we've seen plenty of players like Greg before. Your prototypical 7-foot big to deal with other bigs, defensive instincts and agility second to none. But for KD, as the saying goes, people fear the unknown. While KD himself knew his own potential, people all over gave him 1 or 2 comparisons. Tracy McGrady due to their similarities as tall wings, even though KD is taller, who can become a mismatch nightmare for everyone, or an old school name that never made it and was similar to him stature-wise, Jonathan Bender. For those who don't know, Jonathan Bender was the 5th pick of the 1999 draft and was considered to be the same as KD, a 6'11" wing that can create their own shot and took over the high school ranks. But due to that size, injuries, and simply just not being used right, he faded out of the NBA very quickly, to make a long story short. But KD was absolutely different, and he showcased that at Texas, where he'd be one of the best college freshmen ever. Just listen to the stat line, because I never hear about anyone talk about college KD. 25 points, 11 rebounds, and a shade under 2 blocks and 2 steals a game. And his shooting splits were also amazing, with 47% from the field, 40% from 3, and 80% from the free throw line. KD was the real deal, and no one could tell him otherwise. And the only reason he wasn't taken #1 was due to his combine controversy, and of course, Greg Oden seeming like the more automatic pick than someone like KD, despite the amazing season he just had offensively. But as we all know, KD once again coming second place to Greg Oden, made sure at the end of the day the Trailblazers regretted not taking him, and that he is known as the best player in the draft years later and one of the best of all time. As we know, KD has done a lot and is still doing a lot right now. He just passed Hakeem 12th overall in points in a career and closing in on Elvin Hayes for 11th. Won multiple championships and is regarded as one of the best small forwards of all time. Even if his career decisions aren't really viewed as the best, his basketball skills must be respected no matter what. But the social media era hasn't eventually started yet, and a lot of stories and tape come from locals or word of mouth. So I can only imagine how the KD hype was never worldly known, so the criticism was valid about the real future outlook of a build of a player that is rarely ever seen, if ever seen, compared to the automatic build of a 7-foot giant like Greg Oden. But years later, we just see how KD proved everyone he doubted wrong, and then some. All the hype that he was given in high school was absolutely valid 19 years later, and again, he is one of the most generational NBA prospects that we have ever seen since LeBron James. From the years of 2007 to 2011, the hype for certain players just did not compare to the players we talked about before. You had some players, though, who had their fun under the sun and national attention, like a Chicago legend in Derrick Rose. But compared to who we will talk about next, it is nowhere even near. But funny enough, the next person we will talk about is a Chicago native and another never before seen prospect before, and that is Anthony Davis. Now, Anthony Davis wasn't a highly touted high school recruit and thought as a generational prospect until later in his high school career, mainly because he was a 6'3" point guard with his only college offer at the time being Cleveland State as a junior. But at the end of his junior year, he grew into a 6'8" wing and finally a 6'10" big come his senior season. But what had people absolutely shook about AD at the time, outside of his out of nowhere height transformation, was the ability to retain his dribbling abilities and to shut down people defensively with his long wingspan. In his senior year, he averaged 32 points, 18 rebounds, 4 steals, and listen to this, 7 blocks a game. This would shoot him all the way up to the #1 spot of the 2011 high school class, over future NBA players like Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, a physical monster, Andre Drummond, Austin Rivers, and Bradley Beal. And it was due to his all-around offensive ability with his staggering 7'6" wingspan that was able to contest or block any shot that came his way. And what people loved about him most was the fact that he had a trajectory of an all-around skilled center that absolutely no one could contest. He's agile enough to be any center off the bounce or dribble his way around with the ball on the ground. He has a shooting form from his guard days to shoot on the perimeter and has the wingspan to rise over any other bigs in the post and have his way offensively and defensively. Any way you see it, AD was the ultimate center prospect, and the hype around it was due to it. And the hype only grew where AD would once again defend his status, having one of the best freshman campaigns in college basketball history, averaging 14 points, 10 rebounds, and a staggering 4.7 blocks a game, which led the NCAA in both total and average that season. Again, as a 6'10", 220-pound soaking wet freshman coming out of high school, defending the best of the best in the college game to his ability. If you want to put this more into perspective, AD's 186 blocks in his freshman year puts him 5th all-time in blocks in a season behind NBA legends like Hakeem Olajuwon and David Robinson. But at the same time, he showed more of that all-around game with pick and pops, running circles around other big men, and doing very well at averaging 63% from the field shooting wise. But where he really shined was in the national tournament, where he'd win the entire thing as the MVP of the tournament and getting 6 blocks in the final game to take down Kansas, where even though he went 1 of 10 from the field, he affected the game in another way, getting 6 blocks and 3 steals alongside with that. At this point, denying Anthony Davis was impossible, winning every NCAA award there was and winning the big dance as the MVP of it. So of course, carrying on from his high school hype and his now more than deserved hype from college, he was taken #1 overall in the 2012 NBA draft. But the only thing is, compared to the other 2 guys we talked about, did he live up to his hype given to him throughout his high school and now college career? I'd have to say yes and no. It's no doubt that Anthony Davis has continued to be one of the best bigs in the NBA and to even a consensus top 10 player in the NBA itself. But he for sure knows how to fall short sometimes, whether it's his body failing him, which has been his most daring narrative about him, or him failing his team as we've seen in the playoffs last year. But overall, he has been certainly earned and kept that hype alive year after year. Did people expect more from him? For sure, absolutely for sure. But could you say he's done enough to warrant all that hype after a decade of NBA service? Most certainly. But is he a top 75 player of all time? Well, I will definitely let you decide that one. So far, we talk about 3 American prospects that have absolutely taken the US by storm due to their basketball abilities and upside as players. But in all 3 of those cases, they weren't the most well known to everyone due to their lack of outlets to show said players online. This next player at one point was regarded as the next Kobe Bryant, and we all know him, it's Andrew Wiggins. We were all first introduced to Andrew at just 13 years old with this Hoop mixtape video, Best 13-year-old in the nation, 6'6" Andrew Wiggins. And from there, it was all over, with this video currently sitting at 5 million views to this day. Andrew Wiggins from that point on was regarded as a basketball phenom, and every game he played, the cameras followed. And I mean, where else will you find a complete 13-year-old at 6'6" who can dunk on anyone? This is never before seen stuff right here, and with him only being 13, that just means everyone is alongside for the journey ahead. Throughout his high school career, he started off in Canada with a 44-1 record, winning multiple championship games, and every game being recorded for the viewing pleasure of North America. But it's when he went to Huntington Prep in West Virginia where he became a true household name, now holding the #1 recruit spot in high school ranks and averaging 23, 11, and 2 with 2.5 blocks alongside with that. He was quite literally unstoppable, and with the name Maple Jordan following him everywhere, a name he garnered in Canada, he would continue to beat top recruits over and over again, holding that spot as the best player of the 2013 high school recruiting class over players like Jabari Parker, Julius Randle, Aaron Gordon, and Joel Embiid. And again, this just came from the fact that he had what people thought was a complete game at the high school level, being able to do it all offensively and getting that Kobe Bryant comparison as he decimated the high school field at his young age. And once he graced the cover of Slam magazine alongside Jabari Parker, the damage has been done. He's an American superstar now, and no one can stop talking about him and giving him all types of praise. Even though Andrew was a Canadian, he was an American sports legend now at the high school level. And he'd take his talents to Kansas, one of the most prestigious blue blood basketball schools, to once again prove his status as one of the best to go against the best in the NCAA ranks. At Kansas, though, he'd once again prove the hype was very much real. The all-around offensive game of Andrew Wiggins was on display and now nationally televised. 41 points against West Virginia, 30 points against Oklahoma State, 29 against Iowa State, 27 against TCU. And if you didn't know Andrew as a high schooler, you were forced to know him as a college athlete, as he headlined ESPN and other outlets with his play at Kansas, leading them to a top 10 ranking in the NCAA week after week, and being their best player, averaging 17-5 with a block and a steal a game on great shooting splits considering his very much jump shot heavy game. This would lead him to all types of NCAA awards and of course the #1 pick of the NBA draft to the Minnesota Timberwolves. But as we all know, this is where his story comes to a screeching halt. Because as everyone was waiting to see what Maple Jordan would do at the professional level, we'd just be stuck at home waiting for him to turn into that Canadian phenom and finally make his Kobe Bryant-like jump and be the player that we all thought he would be. But overall, we'd see a slow but satisfying increase over the first 3 seasons of his career, but in that 4th season is when it came to a harsh stop and no one could understand it all. On one hand, you can blame the organization for allowing Jimmy Butler to come in and hold his progress by trying to win a chip too quick and not allowing Wiggins to grow there more, but after 2 seasons of that, it was completely too late. The NBA world was against them and the Wolves needed a slight restart, so they traded Andrew Wiggins to the Warriors. And well, he actually found a great role in Golden State. Andrew Wiggins may have not turned into the superstar like people expected, but in Golden State, one of the best basketball organizations out there, he was able to turn into a top-class wing with a support role to Stephen Curry and as a wing defender being coached by Steve Kerr. And that, of course, turned into a 2002 NBA championship bout. Not as the main guy, but as a cog in a very efficient and effective engine. Now, while he didn't turn into the next Kobe Bryant like a lot of people expected or really anything near that, to be able to humble yourself, become a top-class role player on a different team, and then win a championship from that speaks volumes about how you allow your talent to be used in a different and debatably better way. But as we all know of him now, even though he didn't pan out to be a superstar, we can't say that he isn't a great player in the right system right now. And in that system, it turned him into a one-time NBA champion. Skip a half decade to the future, and there is one thing you notice about American society. We are becoming a lot more involved with social media day by day. And the same can be said about the next generation of sports fans and sports media by the way of their marketing and showing you the next big talents from the high school level. And while we haven't seen a lot of them come and go, whether for better or for worse, there is one in the year of 2016 that gave us the best highlights we have seen from a high school player. And that player was Zion Williamson. Now, Zion himself might be one of the weirdest people of the bunch that we talked about today when it comes to the generational talent label, especially playing as a 6'6" forward and built more like an NFL linebacker than an NBA player. But you just knew that whenever you went online as a basketball viewer, you was going to see Zion somewhere and see him feasting at the high school level. There are so many videos you can see with Zion Williamson's high school highlights that skyrockets into the millions of views. And his most viewed video in AAU Gaming against LaMelo Ball sitting at 15 million views. That is 3 million more than the 5th largest state in America, Pennsylvania. And if you didn't know anything about Zion, you were going to eventually. But what made Zion so great? Well, as we all know, physically, you were not keeping up with him, you weren't jumping with him, and overall, there was nobody in a high school gymnasium that could really even guard him. Only person stopping him was, well, himself. But that was one of his main criticisms at the time, as he played in the 2nd division of his high school league, and you could tell if you watch his highlights, his competition was not the best, and nobody was physically able to even do anything to him. But that doesn't matter, because the highlights came flowing, and people wanted to see what he would just do next. But as he dominated the South Carolina hoop scene and leading his high school to 3 straight championships in his region, he went to Duke, and everyone had waited to see just how he would do against better competition. And well, if you didn't believe in Zion before, you were forced to be a believer now, because everything he did in high school, he did that and then some in college. The dunks, the overpowering, the highlights, everything. At his lone season in college, he'd go on and average 22 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, with 2 steals and 2 blocks a game while shooting 68% from the field. You heard that right. A 6'6" forward shooting 68% from the field. Zion was a physical specimen. In every game, you'd see some type of poster, a breakaway slam where his head was near the rim of the backboard, a 360 dunk, or on the rare occasion, him breaking his shoe in front of former president of the United States, Barack Obama. And as he'd walk away with every major award in college basketball, and even winning the National Player of the Year award as a freshman, which has only been done 3 times. Himself, Anthony Davis, and Kevin Durant, all people that we talked about in this video today. And of course, he'd go on to be the #1 overall pick of the 2019 draft, with all of that hype from college and high school behind him. But what has he done with it? Well, be injured and porn stars, but I will avoid talking about that one. Anyway, Zion's NBA career has been the most hot and cold I have ever seen from a player. Now, in his 5th season, he has only played 114 games in 4 of them, and missed the entire 2022 season due to a foot injury. And considering how much force he puts into his jumps and how much body fat he has and weight, you can only imagine that injury had to be bad. When he plays, he's an all-NBA caliber player that leads his teams night in and night out, but when he's injured, the team falters, even to the point to where his team were on the verge making the playoffs last year with just needing him to get through the play-in. And in that season where Zion missed all but 29 games, he declined due to him not being back there mentally. And fucking Mariah Mills, but again, that is the last joke, I promise. But as the youngest player on this list, Zion still has plenty of time to become the wrecking ball, literally, that we all know him to be, and to be healthy consistently. His career averages in 4 seasons screams perennial All-NBA player and All-Star. He just needs to keep himself healthy. As of right now, he has for sure met the expectations of everyone and then some, still being an unstoppable force in the paint and slowly garnering an all-around game to help his team. But to fully get there, we're going to need to see a few healthy seasons and eventually an NBA championship. Now, Victor Wembanyama is the next man up, already showcasing his abilities for the world to see, already putting up ridiculous highlights for the world to see, and that has people's jaw dropping to the floor almost every single night, and already receiving future predictions of the level of impact similar to LeBron James. Will he meet that expectations? Only time will tell, and I will surely hope to see so myself. If he does, then the basketball world will be eating good for a long time, and the game itself will only end up more and more interesting as more taller players do the exact same he's doing, hopefully. Thank you for watching. Tell me your thoughts on the expectations we put on these players with these labels, and until next time.